Welcome to the deep dive. So we are setting the clocks back to 1921. I mean, you have to picture this as a pivotal year in America.
Oh, absolutely. You got flappers, you've got speakeasies, prohibition is in full swing.
And you have this brand new, explosive industry motion pictures. It's turning regular people into, well, into gods almost overnight.
It really was a world that was balanced on this knife's edge between, a kind of puritanical moral outrage on one side and this gin-soaked excess on the other.
And that balance just, it completely failed. On Labor Day weekend, a party in rooms 1219 and 1220 of the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco.
Yeah.
It ends with the death of a young actress, Virginia Rappe.
And the scandal that followed was so much more than just a police matter. It became this brutal, very public lesson in how fast the American machine can build you up and then just utterly destroy you.
And not always based on the truth either. Our sources for this deep dive detail the whole investigation, the legal nightmare that followed. It really shows that in Hollywood, the second you get too famous, you also get too vulnerable.
So our mission today is to cut through all those sensational headlines and really look at this whole affair through the eyes of someone who was right there on the ground trying to find the truth.
A cynical, dying Pinkerton operative. A man known to us only as Sam.
And Sam, years later, he would look back on this whole case, the case of the star Roscoe Arbuckle, and he summarized it in this chillingly perfect way.
What did he say?
He said, in trying to convict him, everyone framed everybody else.
Wow. And that's what we're digging into. A media frenzy driven by the most powerful publisher in the world, William Randolph Hearst. Testimony from con artists like Maud Delmont.
And the personal struggles of this private eye who was already tracking this really dangerous, interconnected truth about who really held the power on the West Coast.
This is all built on a stack of sources that detail the party, the cover-ups, the media lies, the courtroom drama, and, the slow birth of the hard-boiled detective novel.
We have to start with the man who was tasked with wading through all that filth.
Okay, let's unpack this Pinkerton detective, Sam. Our sources paint this incredibly specific and almost haunting portrait of him.
Yeah, we are not talking about some hard-boiled hero from the movies. He's a man really defined by his own frailty.
They describe him as wiry, rail-thin, with his shocking white hair that, totally contrasts with his really young face.
And that thinness, look, it's all because he's in this constant, all-consuming battle with tuberculosis. Sam is, he's literally a man racing against the clock.
He spent time at Cushman Sanitarium up in Tacoma, just desperately trying to get an edge on the disease. He was taking these lung treatments, balsamia, doing these really rigorous breathing exercises.
Right. Balsamia was this mix of balsamic resins and oils. It was supposed to soothe the lungs, and the whole sanitarium stay, the breathing exercises, it all points to a man just clinging to life.
But the contrast between that physical fragility and his job, it couldn't be starker. He is deep in what he himself called the filthy trade of private investigation.
And his trading was old school. It was brutal and cynical, which, fit the Pinkerton ethos perfectly at the time.
His mentor in Baltimore, what was his name? Jimmy Wright.
Jimmy Wright. A thick, squat fireplug of a man. And he pounded one lesson into Sam's head. Detective work is a nasty, brutal profession. It's not about glory, it's about exposing depravity.
The details of that training are just fascinating to me. It wasn't about looking people in the eye, was it?
Not at all. Wright insisted that real observation wasn't about faces. It was about studying your subject from the rear, looking at their tricks of carriage, their walk, how they wear their clothes, all these little individual mannerisms.
It's the ultimate lesson in being anonymous, isn't it? The detective just fades into the background while he's gathering all this evidence.
Exactly. It's surveillance that's rooted in contempt for your subject. Yeah. And for all this nasty work, he's making $21 a week.
And his typical jobs were, what? Tailing fugitives and these sad, wandering daughter jobs.
Yeah, usually these wealthy but really unhappy young women running away from engagements their family set up with some, lunkhead banker's son.
But Sam's cynicism wasn't just from chasing runaways. Before the Arbuckle case gave him this big, necessary payday, he'd seen the real lethal side of organized power.
And that experience really informs how he sees the Arbuckle frame job later on. Our sources put him in Montana, and he's tracking a labor organizer named Frank Little.
The assignment itself sounds simple. Just tail the guy, take notes on his speeches.
Deceptively simple. Sam knew right away who the real client was, even if the paperwork tried to hide it. It was the Hearst outfit. William Randolph Hearst, or at least people aligned with him, owned huge mines and land all over the West.
And little speeches were. They were dangerous. He was talking about the horrifying conditions the laborers were facing.
Specifically the non-white workers. He talked about Mexes and Indians and Negroes all carted off like animals with no food or water, some of them dying in the boxcars.
That's the kind of talk that threatens the profits of the mining barons, the very people Hearst was in bed with.
Sam was just supposed to be observing, but the job turned lethal fast. In the middle of the night, he's jolted awake. And he watches, hidden, as 4 men in burlap hoods grab Frank Little.
Oh, wow.
They throw him onto a wagon and just whip the horses away into the blackness. Little's death by lynching was a clear act of terror.
So Sam saw it firsthand. The connection between corporate power Hearst, the mine owners, and this organized anonymous violence.
That is such a crucial piece of the puzzle for understanding the Arbuckle case. He learns that the people who pay the bills, who control the media, they also control who lives and who dies in the shadows.
And he carries that dark knowledge back with him to San Francisco.
He returns to his wife, Jose, who is a former nurse, and their new baby, Mary Jane. And Jose is his anchor. She's skeptical but grounded.
Using her nurse's knowledge, right? She's basically managing his health, trying to buy him more time, limiting him to 10 cigarettes a day, making him do the breathing exercises.
And it's Jose who brings this critical medical eye to the whole Arbuckle disaster when Sam takes the case. She's worried about the job, the showgirls, and the scandal.
But she pushes him toward the scientific truth. She actually gets him to request the autopsy file.
And she uses her knowledge to challenge the official story right away. She asks him, how could Virginia Rappe have suffered a ruptured bladder without massive trauma, without broken bones or severe bruising?
She's basically telling him that from a medical standpoint, it sounds impossible, unless, Rappe had a severe pre-existing condition or maybe a botched internal procedure.
She demands he find the actual medical truth, not just the story the police are selling.
And Sam, for his part, he's motivated by his own deadline. He thinks he probably won't make it another 6 months.
So he takes the job, he works the filthy trade to leave money for Jose and the baby. He needs the cash, and Paramount's lawyer, Dominguez, is ready to pay a lot to save their biggest star.
So he's not taking the case for justice. He's taking it for his family's legacy.
With Sam's desperate state established, let's jump into the incident itself. The Labor Day party, room 1220, St. Francis Hotel.
The descriptions make it sound less like a Hollywood party and more like just a chaotic, illegal bender.
Absolutely. This was not champagne and caviar. It was just sheer, sloppy drunkenness. The sources talk about gin blossoms being passed around, scotch, and this terrible gin straight from fruit jars.
A real sign of early, crude prohibition bootlegging. And Arbuckle, feeling good, is just demanding another case of gin sent up.
And Arbuckle himself was this walking paradox. He was billed at a huge 350 pounds for laughs.
But he wasn't actually that big.
No, the Bertillon charts confirmed he was closer to 260. Still a massive guy, but the public image was already an exaggeration.
The guest list is key. You've got Arbuckle, his actor friend Lowell Sherman, Fred Fishback, who's a really important figure, friend and alleged bootlegger who set the whole thing up.
Then Virginia Rappe, the infamous Maud Delmont, her friend Al Semnacher, and 2 showgirls, Alice Blake and Zee Privon.
And the whole story really hinges on Arbuckle's initial claim. He said Rappe arrived uninvited, that she crashed the party.
Right. He said he was taking a shower in the adjoining room, 1219, and found her passed out next to the toilet. He says he then carried her to the bed in room 1220.
And that's the moment the party atmosphere just curdles into this frightening medical crisis.
Rappe becomes violently ill. She's gagging, vomiting, screaming, thrashing around, ripping off her own clothes until she's naked, just crying out in pain.
And the hosts, who are all completely drunk themselves, they just panic.
And they resort to these bizarre, really controversial methods to try and snap her out of it. Arbuckle admitted to trying to use ice on her. He claimed a doctor once told him to do that for hysteria.
But the thing that really sensationalized the case, the thing he denied with horror, was the suggestion of assault with an object.
When he was asked if he put a bottle into her, his reply was just, Jesus, a Coke bottle. He was genuinely horrified by the idea.
The one detail that always stands out is Maud Delmont's intervention. She just immediately takes charge.
Swift and manipulative. She's cradling Virginia, telling the hotel detective to find a doctor. But here's the key part. She insists on her own physician, Dr. Rumwell.
And he's a strange character, right?
A nervous, stuttering man with a funny-looking eye, his coat buttoned up tight. Sam's immediate thought was that Rumwell was already involved somehow, that he was beholden to Delmont.
And it was Delmont who weaponized the story immediately. She told the authorities and later the press that Rappe accused Arbuckle of assault.
Her exact words were, Miss Rappe told her that Mr. Arbuckle had forced himself on her and, in doing so, crushed her. That claim, the crushing, was the foundation of the whole public outcry.
And Rappe was eventually taken to Wakefield Hospital, where she died 4 days later.
Which brings us back to that core medical controversy, the thing Jose was so skeptical about. The media just ran with the crushing story.
But when Arbuckle's lawyer, Dominguez, gets the autopsy, he confirms the finding was a ruptured bladder.
Okay, let's stop here, because this is the entire foundation of the defense. If the prosecution is saying this massive man violently crushed her, why would Dominguez argue the ruptured bladder was actually proof against rape?
It seems counterintuitive.
Well, it all comes down to basic anatomy. Dominguez explained to Sam that for an external force, like a huge body pressing down on her to rupture the bladder, it would almost certainly have to cause other damage.
Right. The bladder's protected by the pelvis.
Exactly. To burst it with external force, you'd probably need a fractured pelvis, or at the very least, severe visible bruising, internal tearing of the vagina, something.
So if the autopsy showed no external trauma, no broken bones, no fresh tearing, the defense could argue it was medically impossible for it to be caused by Arbuckle's weight alone.
Precisely. It shifts the cause of death away from a violent external assault and toward an internal weakness or a pre-existing condition.
And this is where Dr. Rumwell's testimony becomes this huge, unexpected gift to the defense.
Even though he was Delmont's guy, during his dramatic court appearance, Rumwell claimed the tear wasn't fresh, but it also wasn't very old. He suggested it was possibly due to a venereal ailment, specifically gonorrhea.
He actually offered to show the jury the bladder in a jar, right?
He did. It was pure spectacle. But for the DA, it was a huge mistake. By introducing the possibility of a disease, Rumwell suggested Rappe was already medically compromised.
So the defense could argue that a diseased bladder could rupture spontaneously or during a botched procedure, like an abortion.
Exactly. It completely undermined the DA's core charge of violent assault. The medical facts were just being twisted and manipulated by both sides to fit their story.
But the moment those facts hit the press, they stopped mattering. The case stopped being a criminal investigation and became a pure, unadulterated media war.
The story broke with these huge banner headlines. SF Booze Party Kills Young Actress. And William Randolph Hearst Wr., he smelled blood and just seized on it.
He saw this as more than just a way to sell papers, didn't he? It was a chance to enforce his moral worldview and settle some grudges.
Deep personal grudges. His instructions cabled to his reporters, especially to his manager, George, were meticulous, chillingly specific about the personas they had to manufacture.
He demanded Virginia Rappe be portrayed as a virgin, a star of tomorrow, a waif. The public needed a pure victim to cry over.
And Arbuckle. He was to be defined by his excess and his supposed indifference. The instructions were a bloated beast, 350 pounds.
And Hearst insisted they run pictures of him smiling up high and looking smug, especially after Arbuckle got out of jail and had a big meal at the Palace Hotel.
That image of the fat, laughing brute who didn't care, it was meticulously crafted.
It was character assassination on a scale that had never been seen before. And why? Why was he so furious?
Well, he felt the film industry was making his papers look like devils. He was trying to project this image of moral authority while building his American castle at San Simeon.
He was also furious at the head of Paramount, Al Zukor, for damaging the movie business's image.
But the single most effective agent in driving this whole public narrative was Maud Delmont. She didn't just talk to the press, she held court.
At the Fairmont Hotel, right, for the Vigilant Committee.
This black-clad army of grim-faced suffragists. And the stories she spun they weren't just sensational, they were surreal.
She knew the more outrageous the details, the more Hearst's papers would just devour them. She claimed the party was a nude orgy.
And she described Arbuckle disrobing and slathering his whale-like hide with buckets of hot oil.
And here's where it just goes completely off the rails into fantasy. The rare Arabian dance.
While a man played a flute, and then the parrot, the infamous parrot that supposedly called Arbuckle Fatty.
She claimed the parrot affixed its talons on his man-snake during the dance, causing women to faint and scream.
I mean, it's insane that the entire national press ran with stories about parrots and hot oil rituals. It shows the total collapse of journalism into pure spectacle.
It wasn't about news. It was about feeding the public's hunger for celebrity blood.
But all that hysteria was just masking a much deeper, much more powerful motive. W.R. Hearst's personal revenge.
This is what Sam, the Pinkerton, finally uncovers. The real reason Hearst deployed his entire terrifying machine.
And it all comes back to Marion Davies. Hearst was her powerful benefactor. He'd met her when she was only 16, and she was about to star in his big new film, Enchantment.
She was his mistress, his project. In his mind, she was his property.
And Roscoe Arbuckle, completely drunk on a different occasion, confessed his deepest insecurity to Sam, this profound lack of confidence in his manhood.
And he had apparently confided that same vulnerability to Marion Davies.
He then admitted to Sam that he and Marion had a casual, drunken sexual encounter on the beach one night behind a sand dune.
And that's when Sam connects the dots. The same Pinkerton who saw Frank Little killed for corporate profit suddenly understands the whole thing.
He realizes the scope of the frame-up. He says to Arbuckle, "You screwed his girl."
Hearst wasn't on a moral crusade. He was using the biggest media empire in the world to get slow, cruel public revenge on the star who slept with his mistress.
The motivation is established. It's personal, it's powerful, and it's ruthless. And now Sam is hired by Arbuckle's lawyers, Dominguez, and later Gavin McNabb. His mission: run down the girls from the party and, crucially, dismantle Maud Delmont.
And that's a huge challenge. The prosecution is planning to use Delmont's wild stories and the showgirls, Alice Blake and Zay Prevon, who testified that Rappe said, "He hurt me."
So Sam immediately digs into Delmont's background, and he finds out she's a seasoned con artist. Her entire life is based on extortion.
Her partner, Al Semnicher, he confessed their whole operation, right?
Yeah, he admitted their standard MO was to set up wealthy men for a rape or some other compromising situation, then blackmail them. They'd live in high style until the money ran out.
Her criminal record was long. She was the divorced wife of Cassius Clay Woods, and she tried to swindle a young actor, Earl Lynn, out of $5,000 by falsely claiming she was pregnant.
Lynn's father just paid her off to make it go away. It was her pattern. Use sex to extort money.
But here's the most bizarre part. She offered a second, completely different story to the police when they confronted her.
A totally different narrative. She claimed Arbuckle had killed Rappe because, and this is a quote, "he removed the child from her the day before the party. She was ill."
So she's suggesting Rappe was pregnant with someone else's baby, came to the city for a botched abortion from Dr. Rumwell, and Arbuckle was involved in that.
So she has the parrot story for the media and the abortion story for the police. It wasn't about justice. It was about saving her own skin, throwing Arbuckle under the bus with whatever story stuck.
This just highlights the complete chaos of the investigation.
So Sam and his partner, Phil Holton, they focus on the two showgirls, Alice and Zay. They find out the girls are being held under police guard up in Calistoga,
The police are basically sequestering the prosecution's witnesses.
keeping them away from defense lawyers. And Holton finds the whole thing absurd. They weren't in jail, they were getting mud treatments and mineral baths. It was a private prison to keep them on message for the DA.
And Sam's investigation revealed the DA was actively forcing them to change their statements to fit the violent, crushing narrative.
The big breakthrough came during Zay Prevon's testimony. Arbuckle's lawyer, McNabb, was a master of cross-examination, and he hammered her on the single most crucial piece of evidence.
Rappe's statement, "He hurt me."
McNabb needed to find an alternative and he did. Under pressure, Zay eventually admitted that the statement could have been about Fred Fishback.
Why Fishback?
Because Fishback, along with Zay herself, had roughly handled Rappe when she was hysterical. They tossed her into a bath of very cold water, trying to shock her out of a bad drunk.
That must have been a huge moment in court.
It was a bombshell. McNabb pressed her. "You don't know what he meant Mr. Arbuckle was the one who hurt her, do you, Miss Prevon?" And Zay, confused and cornered, had to admit, no.
And just like that, the prosecution's central pillar just crumbles. Without a clear identification, the whole rape charge dissolves into just speculation.
That was the moment the defense knew they could win. Meanwhile, Sam keeps digging, and he uncovers links between Hearst, the bootlegger who supplied the party, a man named Jack Lawrence.
And someone in Arbuckle's circle.
Right, a man named Hibbard. The money trail was complex, but it all led back to the high-level operators.
Which brings us back to the most terrifying figure in Sam's world, the Dark Man.
Sam finds out that the Dark Man, this Pinkerton operative with a missing half-ear and gray hair, was directly involved. He was the one who paid Fishback to turn on Arbuckle and testify against him.
And then Sam has this horrific realization.
He recognizes the description. It's the same man, the same operative, who was sent by Hearst's people to kill Frank Little back in Montana.
Wow. So it establishes this terrifying continuity. The same corporate muscle used to crush labor organizers is now being used to crush a celebrity for personal revenge.
Sam's investigation leads to this direct, violent confrontation on a ferry. The Dark Man beats him severely, nearly kills him, calling it the way of the world.
The message was clear. Stay in the shadows or get crushed.
The legal proceedings were just this brutal conflict of manufactured narratives versus forensic detail. The prosecution, D.A. Brady and Assistant Urin, knew they couldn't just rely on Delmont.
So they relied on the showgirl's ambiguous testimony and what they called the spook evidence.
I love that term, because that's what it was. The DA brings in 3 doors taken from rooms 1219 and 1220. They claim the doors had fingerprints matching Arbuckle's hand pressed over Rappe's as she tried to escape.
They even brought in a fingerprint expert, Professor Heinrich, who bragged he was Sherlock Holmes himself.
It was pure theater, designed to scare the jury. But the defense, led by McNabb, just systematically took it apart.
Oh.
They called the maid Catherine Brennan, and she testified under oath that the room was thoroughly cleaned, wiped down after Arbuckle checked out.
The implication being that any fingerprints found 11 days later were either planted or completely unreliable.
Exactly, and McNabb was so aggressive. He didn't just object. He accused the DA of maintaining witnesses in private prisons, referring to the showgirls in Calistoga.
He knew if he could prove the prosecution was corrupting the process, the jury would be skeptical of all their evidence.
And the case was so chaotic, so full of doubt, that it took 3 separate trials. The first 2 ended in hung juries.
Which tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
The prosecution just could not get a conviction, despite the massive public pressure from Hearst.
And Arbuckle himself complicated things by insisting on taking the stand against his lawyer's advice.
He spoke slowly, deliberately, right, denying everything. The hand on the door asking for a key, hearing her say, "He hurt me."
But the real drama, as Sam finds out, was why Arbuckle had been so quiet at the beginning. Roscoe confessed to Sam that in the immediate aftermath, he genuinely thought he might have accidentally killed her.
Just because of his size and his drunkenness?
His guilt was rooted in this profound clumsiness and self-loathing. He told Sam he was ready to stick a gun into his mouth in his cell.
He was ready to die for a crime he didn't even remember committing.
The turning point only came when his friend, Fred Fishback, the alleged bootlegger, turned on him and testified for the prosecution.
That betrayal gave him clarity.
He realized he was the victim of a plot. He concluded Fishback hadn't just supplied the booze, he arranged the sets, brought in the actors, and had it play out just like he'd written it.
Fishback was the stage manager for the whole frame job.
And despite the defense dismantling the evidence and the final acquittal, he was found not guilty in the 3rd trial. The cost was absolute.
The damage from Hearst's narrative was just irreversible. His films were banned across the country, he lost all his money, his contracts were canceled, his furniture was repossessed.
The public reaction was visceral. The acquittal meant nothing. There's this incredible anecdote. In Wyoming, cowboys rode into a movie house and burned the film canister for gasoline gas right in the street.
The public was completely convinced he was the bloated beast.
By 1924, Roscoe Arbuckle was trapped. He was barely surviving by playing the kazoo and piano in obscurity. He wouldn't star in another major film for a dozen years, the very same year he died.
A man completely destroyed not by a court, but by the cynical power of the media.
Which brings us to the final fascinating twist in our deep dive, the transformation of the detective Sam into the writer, Dashiell Hammett.
His body's just giving out. His TB is winning. He's coughing up blood. The filthy trade has broken him.
The defining moment for Sam is that confrontation with the Dark Man on the ferry. The man beats him severely, calling it the way of the world.
But Sam fights back.
He manages to pull his .32. He shoots the man in the heart and sends him toppling over the railing into the San Francisco Bay.
And that moment, killing the physical embodiment of that corporate violence, the same operative who framed Arbuckle and killed Frank Little, that was his final act as a Pinkerton.
He saw the brutality it took to survive in that world, and he decided he couldn't live that life anymore. He had to find a different way to fight the system.
So he quits. He sells his .32 pistol, the tool of the old, violent, corrupt trade, and uses the money to buy an L.C. Smith typewriter.
It's a literal exchange, violence for words.
Sam and Jose are living off government checks and his writing. He starts selling short pieces to what he called a snotty rag called the Smart Set, earning a penny a word.
But an editor suggests a new magazine, a pulp magazine called Black Mask.
And this is the real birth of the hard-boiled genre. Sam, now writing as Dashiell Hammett, just rejects the literary idea of the detective at the time.
You know, the gentleman sleuth like Craig Kennedy, who drives 4 cars and uses microscopes.
Hammett wanted the truth he had seen firsthand. He wanted to write about the brutal reality of the frame-ups, the systemic corruption he saw in the Arbuckle and Frank Little cases.
He wanted to write about the sweaty, greedy sons-of-bitches who'd kill their own mothers for some loot. He knew the system was rigged, and the hero had to be just as cynical as the criminals.
And his creation was a direct response to his experiences. He decided to make his detective, the man who fights the way of the world, short and fat and ruthless.
He called him the Continental Op, or Nobody. And that short and fat detail is this powerful, subtle nod to Roscoe Arbuckle, the massive victim of the frame-up.
He hammered out that first story for Black Mask, knowing, finally, that it was the first story he had ever told straight and true.
The cynical Pinkerton who saw the darkness consume an innocent man turned to fiction to expose the real, messy, violent truth of the American justice system. A truth that journalism and sworn testimony just refused to touch.
We've taken a deep dive into the Roscoe Arbuckle scandal through the eyes of the man who would become Dashiell Hammett, and what we witnessed is just the chilling, raw power of a manufactured narrative.
How William Randolph Hearst, motivated by the most base personal revenge, used his entire media machine to create a monster out of a man who was, in the end, acquitted after 3 trials.
And we saw how the determined investigation of Sam, the dying Pinkerton, slowly chipped away at that fiction, exposing this web of con artists like Maud Delmont and the terrifying reach of corporate muscle, embodied by the Dark Man.
The simple truth, like Zay Prevon admitting the, quote, "he hurt me," could have just been about a cold bath, was often enough to win in court, but it was never enough to win back a reputation.
The ultimate irony here is just profound. Sam Dashiell Hammett, he witnessed this brutal truth that corporate power and personal vendetta could distort the legal system and completely hijack the media.
And he concluded that the truest way to report on the messy, violent reality of the 1920s wasn't through legitimate reporting or testimony, because both were corrupted. It was through the ruthless honesty of hard-boiled fiction in a pulp magazine.
Think about that. If the true mechanics of Hollywood and politics could only be safely discussed by selling your weapon and buying a typewriter, what does that say about justice a century ago?
When the most truthful document about a major national scandal is a work of fiction, you have to ask yourself, what truth are you ignoring today that might fundamentally change your entire story?
A powerful thought to consider. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.